Okay, so again, thank you very much for joining us in today's presentation. Um, so briefly, what we will cover today is how to structure your presentation, some presentation skills that would be useful for you to have, and how to practice speaking and listening during presentations. At the end of this workshop, we are going to also have an activity where you can practice some of these skills on your own. So to begin with, regarding the structure of your presentation, each presentation needs to have 5 main parts. These are the introduction, the main body, conclusion, list of references, and finally, you can have some time at the end to take questions from the audience. When it comes to the introduction, you can begin by saying hello to everybody, introducing yourself, and then maybe you can also thank them for inviting you to give this presentation. For example, you might want to do that in a conference. After that, you can state your topic, so what you will talk about. You can give the reason why you think that this topic is important, and you can briefly describe the layout of your presentation so the audience knows what you will talk about. So here is an example. Let's pretend that I am giving to you a presentation now on a certain topic. So this is what my introduction could look like. So I could start and say, hello everyone, my name is Maria Sifaki. Thank you for inviting me to give this presentation. Today, I will talk about the impact of nutrition on UCL students' well-being. The reason why this topic is so important is because many research studies have shown that nutrition affects both students' academic performance as well as mental health. And for this presentation, I will examine research studies to argue that UCL cafes should provide healthier food. So this is an example, and your introduction could look more or less like that. So here is some useful vocabulary that you can use in your introduction. So the topic I will presenting to you is, the reason I believe this topic is important is, I would like to start by, I shall begin by, first I will discuss, then next, etc. 1 second. Sorry, the slides are okay. So moving on to the main body, keep in mind that the main body of your introduction may vary according to the type of presentation that you're giving. So for example, if you are presenting your research project, it will be different. In general, in your main body, you need to outline your main arguments. You need to provide some details to back up what you're saying. You need to have references to add credibility. If you want, you can use some images or charts or some tables to make your message to the audience clearer. And also, if you want, you can discuss the opposing view and explain with evidence why, in your opinion, it is not as important. Now, if you are presenting your research project, your main body will be a bit different. What you need to have is a methodology part where you describe what you did for your study and the results part. So here is an example. This is the example for the presentation we were talking about before, the impact of nutrition on UCL student well-being. And this is what the main body could look like here. So we could start by saying high nutrition contributes to good mental health. We need to have our reference here. Daily health reports, those eating 5 fruits per day have lower levels of anxiety. Again, we need to say where we got that from. Students with a diet consisting largely of fruits and vegetables scored higher on exams. Again, reference. So we are outlining our main arguments backed up with references. If we also want, you can have a graph, probably taken from one of the references, where we make it clearer to the audience why the impact of nutrition is so important. Then if we want, we can also give the counter argument. So nutrition is not linked to well-being according to some scientists. We could then say nutrition is shown to not affect the brain. However, recent experiments by Smith, for example, have confirmed the link between nutrition and mental health. So here we give the counter argument and we explain, again, with references, why we don't believe this is a strong viewpoint. And here is some vocabulary that you could use for your main body. You can say to begin with, in particular, furthermore, in addition, for instance. This leads me to my next point, moving on to now we'll address, last but not least, etc. So you use words and phrases that can help you link your points with each other. And now I'm going to pass on to my colleague Anna, who will give the rest of this presentation for you.
Hi, okay. Let me share my screen. Okay, so now that you've gone through the body of your presentation, we need to wrap it up. And so that's where the conclusion comes in. So in terms of the layout, maybe you could have 1 or 2 slides that summarize the main points. So the points that you emphasized in the body, just reiterate them. And then you want to end with your own findings. So what you've concluded overall, or your own opinion if that's relevant. In general, I think it is pretty good to include your own opinion because it shows that you've thought about the material and you've taken a stance on it. But this might not always be relevant to your assignment. So as an example of the conclusion, you could have something like nutrition is important for mental health and performance. So that would be kind of summarizing your body paragraphs or your body slides. And in a longer presentation, you would have probably some more bullet points here. But then to summarize everything and state the main point. So therefore, UCL cafes need to provide more nutritious food. So some vocabulary that you can use with the conclusion as given here. So to sum up, in conclusion or in summary, you can see that this proves or suggests that, or therefore. So these all kind of signal that you're wrapping things up and just emphasizing the main point that you're trying to get across. So after the conclusion, usually there will be some time for questions. This is a part that everyone tends to get nervous about, but really, if you know how to prepare, then it's not so bad. So after you finish with your concluding slides, you could either have another slide that says something like this. So thanks for listening. Any questions? Some people don't like to include slides like that. So if you just say that, that's probably enough, but just something to signal that you're done with the main part of your presentation and you're now ready to accept questions. So what you can do to prepare if you're nervous is to first of all prepare for obvious questions. So these might be things that come up when you're practicing for your friends. Maybe they will ask you something, so that's a good strategy. When you can prepare the answers for those. Maybe you have come across some questions while you're doing your research. So that's always good to bring up and prepare for. So when you're giving presentations, you do have to sort of limit what you say. You can't include all of the information on your slides. And so maybe there are some things you had to leave out, but that you think people will ask you about. So you can always consider those too. And when it comes to taking the questions, be sure to listen attentively and pay attention to what you're being asked. And don't worry if you don't know the answer. You probably won't always know the answer, but that's okay. That is just how it is for everyone. But what you can do is acknowledge that that's an interesting question. It's always nice to thank the person for asking it. And yes, say that it's an interesting question. You can say that you'll find out and get back to them. So that's one strategy to use if you don't know right away and don't really have any speculation. A lot of times at conferences, if you're presenting, you might exchange emails with someone and then follow up with them later and have more of a conversation about a certain question. And then finally, you could say, I'm not sure, but my speculation is, and then try to answer it as best as you can based on what you do know. But just indicating that, you're not definitely sure what the answer is. So now that we've covered kind of the sections of the presentation itself, we can now talk a little bit about presentation skills. So here I'm just going to cover slides, speech and body language, timing, and some practice. Now in terms of slides, you want them to be clear and concise. Use bullet points like we're doing here. In general, you don't want to have too much information on one slide because that's overwhelming for the person who's viewing them. Make sure the text is the right size, so not too big, not too small. Make sure it fits on the slide. Use appropriate colors, graphs, or effects if needed. So with this, especially now that a lot of presentations are being given through Zoom, things can be distorted, especially colors or effects. So you want to be careful with that. Just in general, you probably don't want very bright colors or a lot of different effects. Try to keep it consistent throughout because otherwise it can be distracting. You want to use keywords, not full sentences. So it's too hard and also too distracting for the audience to have to read very big sentences or paragraphs on your slides. So keep it short because the slides are ultimately there to back you up and help you expand on your point. So they don't need to list everything that you're saying. And this last point is maybe more relevant for when you're presenting in person. But if you do use slides for an in-person presentation, you want to face the audience. So don't just be facing your slides and reading directly off them because that's not very engaging for the audience. So you do want to face the audience and talk to them, but you can, gesture to your slides. It's good to refer to them and point things out on them. So now to talk a little bit about speech and body language. So you want to speak to the last row of people. So in particular, you need to be loud enough for them to hear you and for them to feel engaged in the presentation. During your presentation, you can also scan the audience with your eyes. So you don't want to just fixate on one person or one point in the room. You want to look around so that everyone feels involved. And also, you don't want to fidget too much. So moving or, touching your hair a lot or your face, because that can be very distracting. It can also suggest that you're not very confident. Um, so try not to do that too much. Now, I guess that's not to say that you should just be very still and stiff the whole time, because that's also not that interesting to watch and not that engaging. So it is okay to use, hand gestures, pointing things out on your slides. Maybe you have to move a little bit, um, but try to keep it limited. And then with timing, so if you are doing a presentation for an assignment or even presenting at a conference, you'll probably be given a time limit. So the best thing to do is to time and or record your presentation beforehand. So this is just to know about how long it takes. It can also help you while you're still working on your presentation to know about how much more information you need to include or not include. And when you're giving your presentation, remember not to rush, so speak slowly. You'll probably find that you end up presenting in a little bit less time than you thought because you might be nervous and speak slightly faster, which is fine, but just try to remind yourself to speak slowly. You can pause between slides. That's kind of a good breaking point and a chance to sort of help yourself reset and prepare for the next slide. Another tactic people use is to sometimes take a sip of water because that can help you slow down a little. So it's okay to take these little pauses because it'll help the audience too to keep up with where you're going. And now actually we've come to our first and final activity of today. So this was initially designed when we were able to do this workshop in person, but I think we can try it now too. So if you are willing to participate, then we'll basically have you practice just giving a short presentation here. And we can stop the recording before we do this so that you don't feel as pressured. So what can you talk about? Actually, maybe something that you're currently working on. If you're currently preparing a presentation and you want to practice that, then that's great. But if you can't think of anything, then you could talk about your favorite hobby. It's what you like to do. A recent holiday that you took, maybe a famous person, or a good recipe, so something you like to cook. And while you're doing this, remember to introduce yourself and your topic. Speak slowly and clearly, and have a few main points. And then finally summarize everything that you said again at the end. Okay. Shall we pause? pause the recording here. Okay.